Hello and welcome to Arsenal Analysed. I'm JC. I hope you're doing well. Today I bring you tactical analysis on Arsenal 5, Nottingham Forest 0. What an emphatic win this was. Arsenal back at the top of the league after a recent City victory. Breaking it all down for you in the latest episode. And if you are looking forward to it, go ahead and smash that like button. Subscribe if you're new around here. But let's waste no more time at all and dive straight into things. Looking at the starting lineups, I suppose the big in question mark for Arsenal each and every week is the left-back position, given that Zinchenko is still unavailable. Is that a long-term concern for us Arsenal fans? And Arteta will have to wait and see. But the biggest argument is whether or not to go with Kieran Tierney, the more naturally left-sided left-back, or Tomiyasu, who likes to play his trade at right back, but a very versatile player who can play across all positions in that defensive line. And whilst he has been called upon at left back, he always seems to do a very, very good job. And today was no different to some of those previous performances. As you can also see, I've got Nelson up there at right wing because Bukayo Saka unfortunately came off quite early on in the game. So for the purpose of tactical analysis, we've got Nelson in there from the word go. But apart from that, no real surprises. And hopefully the Saka injury isn't one that needs to be a concern. Hopefully it's just a case of maybe a few days, more of a precautionary substitution, if you will. Now, on paper, looking at both sides, Arsenal set up in their typical 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1, however you want to kind of word it. Nottingham Forest, on the other hand, again on paper, they set up as a 4-3-3. However, starting with Arsenal, when we were defending, we did see that typical shape of 4-4-2. Martinelli playing on the left, Saka or Nelson playing on the right, and Odegaard playing as that sort of second pressure striker, if you will. When we're sort of defending a little bit deeper, when we're applying that pressure, we saw the usual 5 players applying that pressure to the back line of Nottingham Forest. However, there were occasions in this particular game when Arsenal were defending deep, very few and far between, may I add. We did see Thomas Partey dropping in here as more of a back 5, or sometimes what we did see is more of a 4-1-4-1 formation, something that we haven't all often seen this season when Arsenal have played. Maybe Arteta looking to change things just slightly, because one other thing that I noticed was the role of Granit Xhaka was slightly different to what we have seen in previous weeks. Obviously, having lost against PSV and grinding out 2 1-0 wins in our previous Premier League games, maybe there were just a few tweaks where opposition was starting to maybe get ahead of what Arteta was trying to do from an attacking focus, for example. But that's pretty much how Arsenal lined up from a defensive point of view. What did that look like from a Forest point of view in terms of their attacking and defending? So starting with their defending, there were times where we saw Nketiah come here into a back 5. We saw Fuller and Yates often come out to their right-hand side and Lingard coming in here. So we did often see a 5-3-2. Now, the reason we saw that is because Arsenal in recent weeks often like to overload on that left-hand side. We see Jesus, Granit Xhaka and Martinelli grouped together, offering those wide rotations. It isn't always Granit Xhaka in this position. Sometimes he can be here with Jesus being slightly deeper. Sometimes we see Martinelli in that Jesus position and Granit Xhaka out wide. But because of how well these three have done in this particular system, I do think that Forest try to overload in this area with the likes of their 2 central midfield players overloading and Nketiah coming in here so that we can see 4 players effectively looking to mark those players out the game. Now, Arsenal obviously didn't always go down the left-hand side, which I can show you some pictures of action areas and Arsenal's passing shape in just a moment. But there were times when we saw in this formation a 4-5-1 formation. And when Arsenal had the ball out on the right-hand side, we would see Lingard come out here to make it more of a 4-4-2. And then likewise, Gibbs-White out here on this left-hand side when Arsenal had the ball on the left-hand side. There were times when, believe it or not, yes, they had a back 6. Yates and Frula would take turns of jumping into a back six. And I've got some very good pictures of the key moments in the game from the first, and I think it was the second or third goal, where we can literally throw a blanket over all of these players for Nottingham Forest in this game, just because of how poorly they defended. With regards to Arsenal, looking at their attacking shape, yes, as already mentioned, we did use that typical front five formation. Thomas Partey sitting just behind. Saliba and Gabriel, the defenders. Thomas Partey would often drop deep in here to pick up the ball from these two, because they do play quite wide. And we would see Tomiyasu and Ben White. Ben White often getting on the overlap, sometimes making up a front six for Arsenal, something that we're seeing more this season compared to last season, where Tomiyasu played down that right-hand side pretty much the whole season, barring his injury towards the back end of the season. There were times when Arsenal played really narrow, where we saw White and Tomiyasu coming in here, and that was to just allow our players to play a little bit more like this in these wide areas. But more often than not, Arsenal did play very, very narrow in this particular game. And one thing that I did notice quite often is we were seeing Xhaka drop a lot deeper at times when Arsenal were playing, I suppose, in that middle third, if you will. It was more of a 2-4-4. Again, Arteta just looking to make those little tweaks in the game. Maybe some teams getting a little bit wise to Arsenal's front five. Maybe we're a little bit more exposed on the counter-attack. But what I did really like is just how fluid this system was for Arsenal today. We were a 4-1-4-1 looking to hit them on their counter-attack when they had their chances few and far between. There were also the typical 4-4-2 where we spring into those counter-attacks, which is where Partey's goal, Reiss Nelson's first goal came from. There were also the front five that we usually see. There was the front six with Ben White adding on that right-hand side, looking to overload with the likes of Odegaard, Nelson and Saka when he was on. There was Granit Xhaka dropping a little bit deeper to create a bit of more of an overload in midfield because of the numbers the Nottingham Forest had in there. So there's just so much to analyse. A really, 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 really good game to look at. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope you did too. But let's have a look at those action areas and the passing shape, just to kind of back up a little more of what I've just shown you on that tactical board. So looking at Arsenal here, as already mentioned, very, very narrow. Normally we see the likes of Saka and Martinelli just a little bit wider. Ben White even more wide, looking to get around Saka. In some cases, we see Tomiyasu playing quite inverted. We're seeing that quite a lot with him and the likes of Zinchenko, so no real surprises there. But you can see what I mean with Granit Xhaka, number 34, playing much deeper than usual, playing more of a sort of deep double pivot. I think Arteta wants there to be a lot more football played on the halfway line, looking to open up these teams that are playing quite deep. And Nottingham Forest today did play with two very low blocks with not much space between the lines. And Thomas Partey did very, very well on several occasions in this particular game to break those lines, especially for that Reiss Nelson first goal, which we'll go into in just a moment. And looking at those action areas there, quite typically in previous weeks for those regular watchers, the arrows on the left and the right-hand side for Arsenal are much further forward. There's a lot more deeper orange on the width of Arsenal, as we're always looking to really expose those teams out wide. But that passing shape there suggests that we played very narrow today, and there's more of an equal split across those action areas. Nottingham Forest looking to hurt Arsenal out wide because of how narrow we were playing. When we look back at that tactical board, when Arsenal were playing with a front five and Thomas Partey was playing there with Tomiyasu and Ben White as an inverted fullbacks, a lot of that space for Nottingham Forest was out wide there. And that's why we saw a 4-3-3 at times, where we saw Lingard and Gibbs-White maybe pulling out wide in that front three, as we can see their number 11 and 10 in their passing shape. And also number 32 and 34, that's Lodi and Aurier, looking to try and get as much width as possible, making up five in midfield, making up five when attacking. So that's the information there. Let's have a look at the key moments in the game. This is the first goal we can see here in the yellow circle. Bukayo Saka whipping the ball into the box. Now, for Nottingham Forest, I'd be absolutely fuming. There are 6 players in the 18-yard box. Granted that 2 Nottingham Forest players are here, focusing on Saka and Ben White. Ben White making that typical overlapping run. We can see there Lingard where he's not facing the ball as it's being delivered into the box, because he's looking to track that run of Ben White, which means that it gives Saka the space to cut inside on that left foot and whip that ball in. But what would really frustrate me, Dean Henderson especially, is you've got 3 players in that white oval shape there, all Martinelli, all of which too late in reacting to this cross. And we've also got that one blue dot for another player for Nottingham Forest who just watches the ball instead of backing off towards that 18-yard, the penalty spot, and looking to cancel out that cross. So I'd be absolutely fuming. There's enough players in there to stop that cross coming in, or at least put Martinelli under the pressure to maybe, misjudge his header, or just allow it to be a poorer header for Dean Henderson to make that save. Now, going back to what I mentioned on the tactical board, there were many, many occasions where Nottingham Forest were playing really, really deep, allowing Arsenal to play football in front of them in and around that 18-yard box. There wasn't very much space between the lines, and I'll show you this in goal number 5. But Arsenal just really hit Nottingham Forest by surprise. Thomas Partey in the yellow circle, the yellow arrow, showing that ball into Granit Xhaka, which is the red circle, and the run that he's looking to make, breaking between the lines. And then we've got 3 Arsenal players there in the white circles, and the 3 players of Nottingham Forest beyond in that area, all looking to track those runners. The furthest player away is Reiss Nelson, looking to make that run around the back. And their left back, which was Lodi on this occasion, not looking, too busy ball watching, not looking at the run of Reiss Nelson. And Granit Xhaka playing really, really well between the 2 defenders of Cook and Aurier, getting between those spaces. And this is really where that goal was made. Thomas Partey breaking those lines. Granit Xhaka running between the 2 defenders, exploiting that space. And obviously Reiss Nelson taking advantage of Lodi being caught ball watching. We all know where the ball eventually ends up. It comes square to Gabriel Jesus, who eventually puts the ball to the back post where Reiss Nelson is. He sends 2 players the wrong way, shoots at Henderson, which he saves, and then the follow-up shot is put in the back of the net. This is another example, going back to what I mentioned in the tactical board, where you could quite literally throw a blanket over all of the Nottingham Forest defenders in the box. Again, if I was Dean Henderson, I'd be absolutely fuming. Odegaard and Jesus really dancing with each other here with the ball. 1-2, 1-2, before the ball eventually comes in the box. Now we can see here just on the edge of the 6-yard box as the ball comes in, there are 3 players there who could block the ball. We can even see one of those players with his hands by his side, as he doesn't want to give away a penalty for handball. But still, there are 2 players that are in and around Reiss Nelson. He manages to react quickest and get just in front of both of those players to take a little touch on the ball, gliding it into that back post to make it 3-0. But again, this is absolutely shocking defending from Nottingham Forest. There are at least 3 or 4 players here who should be applying more pressure and allowing them to put themselves in a bit of a better position. Reiss Nelson just that much more hungrier to get on the end of the ball. Picture number 4, which is Thomas Partey's goal. Pick of the bunch for me today. Let me know down in the comments, what was your favourite goal from today's game? Now, whilst I don't want to take any shine off of this finish, because it was absolutely sublime, 2 top draw finishes from our number 5 this season already. But again, from a Nottingham Forest point of view, I'd be fuming. There are 4 players. We can see those blue arrows. There are 4 players there who should be closing this ball down a lot quicker, being a lot more hungry, showing a lot more determination to get there before Thomas Partey. And yes, whilst the ball is travelling away from them, in this particular picture where I've paused it, he is the furthest player away from the ball. They should be making far more of an effort to close this down, try and putting Thomas Partey off, putting their bodies on the line to really stop this ball from even getting on target. But credit where credit's due. It was top bins. Dean Henderson, who's in a great position here. You can see from the picture towards that left-hand side, more towards his near post, and even he couldn't get it. But again, so much there to be looked at from a coach's point of view. And I'm sure Cooper will be looking at that on the training ground come next week. And then finally, we have Odegaard's goal. Again, Thomas Partey here in the red circle of the arrow. That's the direction of the ball in towards Jesus. We know that he waits a little bit for Odegaard to get into position. We can see Odegaard entering in between those 2 lines. And that's what I mentioned before. They made it very difficult for Arsenal at times. This was Probably a shape that we saw quite often throughout the game, allowing Arsenal, as already mentioned, to play in front of the 18-yard box, exploit certain spaces when they opened up, taking our time to really pick the right types of passes. But eventually, Odegaard picks up the ball, dances around a few players, and absolutely spanks this ball into the top left corner, making it 5-0. But even here, you would think that there's enough pressure, not a lot of space for these players to operate, to not allow Arsenal to even get a shot off. But again, they defended so very, very poorly. And then to finish up, we've got some top statistics from Arsenal players today on the left-hand side. As always, pause it at this point and go through them at your own pace. We won't be going through them. But on the right-hand side, I've got my Arsenal man of the match. No, it's not Granit Xhaka, who has been my man of the match on the 2 or 3 last occasions in Premier League games, but it is Thomas Partey. Just have a look at that heat map. He was absolutely everywhere today. He was the engine, he was the anchor, he was the deep pivot. He was everything that Arsenal done well today. He set the tone. He was rewarded with a goal. Even if he didn't score today, he would still be my man of the match. He was just everywhere. His tackling, his pressures, the shape that he put himself into, not allowing Nottingham Forest to pass between Arsenal's lines, the passing, the long balls, absolutely sublime. But 90 minutes play, or 90 plus minutes played, a goal, 125 touches, over 100 completed passes at 92% completion rate, 1 key pass, 4 long balls completed, 4 shots, which is crazy, 3 duels won, 2 tackles, and a clearance. Absolutely sublime stuff from our number 5, Thomas Partey. Let me know down in the comments below. Number 1, what was your favourite goal from today? And who was your Arsenal man of the match? I love breaking down these types of games, not just because Arsenal won, but there's just so much to analyse. I hope you've learned something new today. If you have done, go ahead and smash that like button. Subscribe if you're new around here. And make sure you got that notification bell button on, because you won't want to miss out on the next episode of Tactical Analysis. But for now, I'm JC, and I'll catch you in the next one. Stay safe and take care.